like dynamite. I never meant to make you cry.
Hello and welcome to your new weekly edition of This is Ibrox, the Rangers podcast. My name's Scott Patterson. You're very welcome. Joining us, as always, on the pod this week, Tommy McIntyre joins us. Hi, Tommy.
Hi, Scott. How's it going?
Very well. And yourself?
Yes, good, thank you.
Decent weekend?
Yeah, it was actually. I managed to shoot a reasonable round of golf, and in true Scottish weather style, what is it, April? Started off cloudy, midway through the back nine, and we're not talking the Masters here, by the way, unless it was a master class in how not to play a course. Then it went scorching sunshine, and towards the back end of the back nine, it was snowing. By the time I got home, it was hailstones.
Truly bizarre.
Yeah, welcome April.
And joining us in the pod again this week is Robbie. Hi, Robbie. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yes, very well. Thank you. Good weekend yourself?
It was good. Doesn't sound as eventful as Tommy's yet enough. But,
Were you golfing this weekend?
No, but I was watching it. I was watching it well, trying to take some tips. As you know, I'm trying to get into it, but doing so very, very poorly. So trying my best.
Did you win anything from the old bookies at the weekend on the golf, Thomas?
No, I don't gamble.
I had Scottish Scheffler on each way, and I think he was tied 18, so I think it was 60-1. Not a bad shout, but obviously not good enough. He wasn't in the top 11, so it wasn't good enough.
Yeah, I don't gamble because I don't like the idea of not being able to do the risk stuff, right, and losing my money. So I've only ever put one sure thing on that came up, and that was obviously Rangers winning the title this season. So that was just money in the bank, though.
It's a double winner.
That's very nice. I like that. This Ibrox podcast is brought to you by our good friends at Treble H Mortgages, the one-stop shop for all your mortgage insurance and your mortgage insurance needs. Contact them as early as you can, 01453 887 179, or via email hello@hhhmortgages.com. Via their company website, they can reach that triplehmortgages.com. Similar address on Facebook, that's hhhmortgages.com. As you'll know by now, if you jump on and you speak to these guys and mention my name, Tommy, Robbie, or indeed Willie Boyd, they will look after you very well indeed from start to finish. We should note that we also have a Champions Top giveaway that will be coming very soon via all of our social media channels. So we urge you to look out for that over the coming weeks, and we will release more on that as we have it over the next couple of weeks. This week on the pod, we speak about the women winning again at the training centre yesterday. We will do a little bit on the new contract for Leon Balogun. We'll also speak about the look ahead to the Scottish Cup game next Sunday. We now know it's at 3 o'clock. Thomas, we'll start with the league game, the first of 5 to go this season, of course, and we welcomed Hibs Ibrox at the weekend. Convincing, perhaps not. Stuffy, absolutely.
Yeah, first of all, playing fast and loose with the word welcome. Not entirely sure I would welcome that team anywhere. But I do appreciate they turn up and you have to let them in. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right there in that, joking aside, that analysis, I thought we started relatively kind of in control, but without really opening them up.
Yeah.
Then we got our goals, really good quality goals. That was the shining highlights of the game. And then there were large periods, particularly in the second half, where it all got a little bit stretched and lethargic. And Hibs, if they would have been on their day, could have taken more than just the one chance.
Yeah,
actually. And then it was ultimately a little bit. I don't know about you guys or the rest of the listeners and watchers, but there was just a little bit of this could end up being a point, as opposed to being fully in control when it was 2-0. I think after. Keep me right here. I think we scored the second in the 63rd, 62nd minute or something like that.
Yeah.
But those last 12 minutes after Hibs got one back were a little bit ropey. And I suppose in one way it's good that we got out with the win. And the other way, performances haven't been stellar by and large recently. And that's fine if you're winning the title and all that kind of good stuff. But really can't take that level of performance or lethargy into the weekend's game, because it's a statement game, and I can bet your bottom dollar that our rivals from across the city will be really up for it, because it's their last chance for any type of silverware. And really we can end their season in April. So that's probably the one big warning. But there was definitely, would I say it was deserved 3 points? I think on balance, yes, I would.
Robbie, I felt we started the game okay. The game was almost split into quarters in many respects. I thought the sort of first half, if you like, I thought we played relatively well, but that second part on the lead up to half time, I thought we looked like we'd just taken our eye off the ball a little bit. Did you not?
As much as even you say that, I don't think there was sort of any period in the game where we're as dominant as we can be or normally are, and likewise, it's probably one of the most vulnerable we've looked as well. I think, touched on it previous weeks, again, don't want to be too critical of it because there's not been many things that have went sort of full away this season, but I think definitely we spoke about the potential weakness that sides will look to exploit for us, and I think again it showed it's probably as in a wide areas. So I actually think probably our other games against Hibs, 10 points for 12 against Hibs is a really good return in any season. But being totally honest, it's probably been quite fortunate for us to get that many points against them because they have been pretty dangerous. But another common team I think is they've probably been one of the few teams that have looked to exploit our left-hand side as opposed to, as I was saying last week, our right, because I think that other teams maybe think about the threat a Kent, whereas maybe not so much our right-hand side. But I definitely think that they felt that Martin Boyle's maybe not got to beating a Barisic, but certainly seems to, cause my wee bit of a problem. So I wouldn't really say at any point in the game we were as convincing as usual. However, again, the difference being from this season is the point everybody's been making is an old cliche, but the difference between this season when we're not playing too well is we're still able to grind out these results. I wouldn't say we've done it through, McGregor making any outstanding saves or us being ultra clinical. We just seem to get over the line, and we look at seasons gone by, title winning teams. It's a very good quality to have. However, I think it's worth noting that you can only get away with saying that so often, and it is really important to keep drumming in these good habits because, as Tommy said, it's a huge game next week, and it is easy to get sort of lethargic and keep your foot off the boil a wee bit. But I think when you've still got a Scottish Cup to win, then I think good habits are really key. So hopefully we can kind of address some of the issues we face at the weekend and sort them come Sunday 3 p.m. now.
Sorry, because just there's something quite interesting in that as well. And I agree with what you're saying there, Robbie. Especially the interesting 3 o'clock on Sunday point. But the game was pretty characterised by that Borna Barisic dynamic.
Yeah. And
particularly in terms of Boyle seemed to be really good at exploiting the corridor between Barisic and Helander. I don't think he went round the outside more than really once. There was a good run at one point. He went round the far side of Barisic, who didn't track him. I think Barisic put in 2 blocks actually when Boyle was trying to cross at that point. But he was really good at exploiting that little gap there, and you could see a lot of chatting going on between Helander and Barisic off that. But I do agree there wasn't a host of chances, but behaviourally it's like any game, but particularly Rangers at Ibrox this season, we are used to dominating, and for a large portion of that game, it didn't seem like we had our hands on the domination kind of button, so to speak. We were getting chopped up a little bit in the midfield. Hibs were moving it really quickly into the back line. Boyle was using that exploitative pace really, really well, and so it felt like we were getting pushed a little bit back. Yeah. And then we had to get our hands, back on the game again. It's just an interesting and just a final kind of point to that, because I agree, I don't like cliches either. Robbie makes a very good point, and that those games that we're talking about, I think at least 3 of them, it might be 4 off the top of my head, but have ended in no more than a 1-goal margin.
Yeah.
Between ourselves and Hibs. Hibs are a good team. They play nice football and they've got a really good attacking threat. We've seen them off the premises on 3 out of 4 occasions. That's a really, really good return. And these games are expected to be difficult. Rangers, as much as we absolutely laud them quite rightly, probably in the business of completely steamrolling all of these teams in the league. But again, if somebody's turning around and saying, well, you'll get near maximum points out of your 4 encounters with the team from Easter Road, I'll take that every day of the week. But it was a wee bit nervy towards the end.
Because I agree with what you're saying there. They are a decent side, and I think this year we've been so used to just almost battering every team, because for me, this has taken absolutely nothing away from what we've achieved in the type of side we are. But in general, I don't think the standard of the league this year is as good as it has been in previous title-winning seasons. However, Hibs probably are one of the only teams that I think when you face, you feel as though they've got a kind of decent attacking threat. So we probably shouldn't be too surprised that a team in the league is actually causing us a wee bit of problems, because you probably over the course of the season we should probably be getting that more than we currently are. But given, in my opinion, the standard of the league, we're probably not finding that as often. So that's just reverting back to the point where it's really important that we maintain our own standards, even though the league's almost a wee bit has been too easy for this season. It's important we maintain our own standards, because next week's such a huge game. If we're able to see Celtic off, then we could be looking at winning a double, which would be a massive achievement, obviously on top of the fact that they could do a team campaign.
Yeah, I mean, definitely on you, the double, maybe not completely in agreement with you there, Robbie, about the standard of the teams in the league in terms of that, and without spending all night going line by line through players and line by line through teams. Although I think I sense the wider point you're making. I think it's that old age conundrum, actually, or old age adage, maybe a sentence that doesn't work, but in terms of, a serious point, which is you can have the most talented players. They will always find it to some extent difficult when they come up against Endeavour. And what I don't think is missing in any part of the Premiership up here is the level of endeavour, particularly when you're playing against somebody in a blue jersey. Mm-hmm. And so, our players need to do two things. They need to, one, win a lot of those physical battles and match the endeavour. And then they have to do enough to unlock these teams as well. So they have to bring both the fight and the talent. Whereas, not to be disparaging about lots of teams or lots of players who are doing their best in the league, maybe are only expected to bring the endeavour side and maybe every once in a blue moon a wee bit of talent. Our teams need to do both of that. That wasn't your point, I get that, but I think it's, we have to play across that quite a lot, which makes all of these games relatively difficult. I don't think there's anybody in the dressing room who would say otherwise. But I think there's some pretty decent teams in there actually as units. Maybe individually I could get on board with your level of quality point, but I think actually collectively there's a lot of decent teams in there that make it very difficult to break down. And just a final point, I think there's maybe a sea change from previous title winning seasons in that maybe this is the final season where teams thought they still might have a chance against this growing Rangers. Yeah. Be able to take something off us. I think that's been put to bed quite harshly. Put to bed with no dinner, right? But also, I think the standard of manager in the league as well, and the setups and what teams were trying to achieve was probably slightly different in terms of the money in the league as well. There's a bit more of a home brew feel to some of the teams in this league, if that's a reasonable way to say it.
Yeah. So the first goal at the weekend, indeed, the move starts from our left back, Barisic. Tommy, with one of these classic crosses that we've became almost accustomed to, and Roof forces a really good save from Marciano when Hibs clear the ball. It comes out to Joe Rebo about 20 yards out, and he plays the ball out to Nathan Patterson. Another excellent performance from Nathan Patterson, which we'll come on to. Plays the ball just ahead of Morelos, who just goes to basically drive it across the centre of the pitch, and there's a bit of a stramash, if you like. Ball comes up in the air, and Joe Rebo with an absolutely wonderful finish. Tommy, I know you're a big fan of Joe Rebo. Do you think he needed that goal?
I think he did actually. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to look at that. And I am a massive fan, and I don't think that makes me an outlier in any way, shape, or form for the support. But he has been bitty. Certainly this maybe second half of the season. I think he started really strongly with some injuries in there, and he's kind of faded a little bit. Not all of that his fault. Nobody doubts there's a really good player in there, right? We all get that. But yeah, I think he could do with something for his confidence. And he took the goal really well. And that was really interesting to see that for a player who's maybe low on the confidence sheet, a little bit in front of goal, I haven't got one in a while, didn't take the touch, didn't try and get it under control, just hit it first time. I think it was a lovely finish. Marciano, who I think is tipped for other teams in this league, would maybe look at himself and think he could have possibly closer to that, because I don't think Rebo actually catched it as cleanly as he really wanted to. Yeah. Not that I'm complaining or dismissing Rebo's technical abilities or anything like that. I would have skied it after taking a touch, right? But I skied it with the touch. But no, I thought it was really good, and I thought he had a really good game anyway. I thought he looked really, really lively. I thought Morelos was really lively in there as well. And then, as you referenced, Barisic, who I'm pretty sure could undress his wife with that left peg, it has to be said. or anybody else's wife, depending on
what time's it.
Yeah, I've got a migraine, leave me alone, right? But not one for the listeners, that. But no, I just think I still maintain he could defend slightly better. I sense we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I mean, I thought he was a really good outball. But you mentioned Patterson as well, and I know you and Robbie and all that will want to speak about Nathan Patterson. Nathan was given just as good as he was getting going forward as well, and kept a really impressive, performance on the pitch. But yeah, I thought. Sorry, get back to your point. Joe Rebo did need the goal, and he took it really, really well.
Robbie, we spoke last week about how Aribo was maybe one of the guys that we couldn't quite decide that when come the sort of Celtic Cup game, if Aribo could start in that midfield three or perhaps a bit more advanced, maybe not start at all. And I think you said yourself that depending on who played at the weekend, there's maybe a good chance that would be closer to the starting 11 for the game on Sunday. I don't think Aribo really done himself any harm at all for a starting place this coming weekend.
Yeah, so I think personally, if there was another player in the squad who was on a wee bit more form, in my opinion, I think they would potentially play. I think they played relatively well, but I think it goes back to a point I made after the last Old Firm. Like, if you were to have thought maybe last year before, if we had to try and picture a sort of midfield that we're going to have who is capable of going to, it was Parkhead on that occasion, now at Ibrox, in a tight Old Firm tie, would you picture a midfield of Davis, Glenn Kamara and Joe Aribo? And that's nothing against any of those players individually. It's just that sort of blend isn't one that you'd normally associate with an Old Firm winning side. So I still think that if we are to go into that game with that midfield three, there is a chance that certainly know that it would struggle, but I struggle to see how it would be a real dominating midfield, as I think it's probably been kind of proved by the last maybe three Old Firms.
So do you think, Robbie, does that come from the fact that, so the three that you mentioned, indeed, if we were to go with that three against Celtic on Sunday, and excuse the term, but they're basically three footballers. There isn't anyone in there to break things up or maybe to clog things up a little bit ahead of that back four.
And see the thing, see what I'm saying, it sounds very simple, as if it's almost too simple, but I even think that if you look to our last sort of few games where we've been vulnerable attacking, again, I spoke about before about the sort of importance of the right centre mid, left centre mid. I think that when Aribo plays, and again, I'm being harsh on him because he was on the right in the midfield three, but more often than not, I think when Aribo plays in the midfield, you see us get exploited more at fullback, whereas see our first sort of 6-7-1 for the season, I don't think there was any coincidence that Taverna was playing so well because Ryan Jack was in the team, and I don't think it was through him doing anything sort of obvious or outstanding. I just think he's more suited to that role that's been asked him, whereas even when you sort of see, obviously he's goal apart because he scored his goal inside the box, but even when you see a lot of the positions that he will take up on the ball when he's playing that sort of right centre mid role, it's a lot deeper, it's a lot further away from the opposition's goal. Personally, I think he's better further up the pitch, so whether that's have a Davis Kamara together a wee bit deeper and let him go further forward, personally I think that would probably work a wee bit better. But I think that Celtic played with two wingers, 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, whatever one it was, at the weekend. One winger scored two, the other winger scored one and got an assist.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any doubt that that's going to be an area that they'll try and exploit. And just naturally, because the way we play, you don't want to take the attacking intent away from our fullbacks because they're so good at it. And I think as soon as you do that, you're sort of conceding what you're good at to try and counteract what the opposition isn't as good at as your own strengths, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I definitely don't think we should I don't think we should sort of stop allowing our fullbacks to do what they're good at. But if we're going to, then I think we need to be a wee bit better at trying to counteract that. So the likes of Hibs example, I mean, that was against a wing back. I thought we struggled. So if that's against a good winger with an overlapping fullback, it could be even more difficult. I think likewise at the weekend, for me, I actually think there's been a few games we've struggled against teams that play 3-5-2 because, again, our fullbacks would naturally go that high. I think if we play against teams like Hibs, see if they were to have one striker, two wingers, naturally their wingers would just sack our fullbacks. But see, because they had two strikers, there would always be two guys up the pitch directly against our two centre halves. So again, I think when that happens and our fullbacks are high like they should be, I do think there's been times we've struggled that way. So again, that's when Tommy was talking on. I agree with him, the fact that they exploited the sort of gaps between our centre half and our fullback. Yeah. For me, that was just because they left two guys up against our two, and likewise when it comes to Celtic, they will obviously be a lot more brave with their wingers than other teams would with their wingers. So I just think that, I know I've went a pure roundabout point talking about this here, but
yeah, it's shocking, by the way, Robbie.
I've been talking to you too long, mate. But back to the original point, me personally, I wouldn't start anyone in midfield. But we've done it before and we've won those games by doing it, so fingers crossed if he does it. I mean, these guys know better than me, so fingers crossed they're proved right if they go with that.
So we go 1-0 at... Sorry, Thomas.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's permutations-led conversations, isn't it? So it becomes a bit moot because Ryan Jack's injured. Yeah. So he's not going to play. Tav's injured, so he's not going to play. So you're going to go with Patterson, unless there's a surprise and Balogun's back in it right back. I very much doubt that'll happen, right? But I feel I need to say it just because there's a record there. But I agree. The only 2 points I would drop in there is one, something I don't think is going to happen, in that, remember, you've still got Bongani Zungu.
Yeah.
Not like God's hope in hell unless Steven Gerrard's got money on him starting. No way he's starting, right? But then also, whilst we're saying that could be the team that started, remember it started with Morelos and Roof. Not entirely sure that will happen at the weekend. I think one of them will drop out and it will be Roof, right? So then you're looking at who could you accommodate a Rebo and drop somebody else in. Arfield came off the bench for a little bit of a leg warmer, and I'm sensing that Arfield might come back in onto the starting lineup for the Celtic game.
See, I would have thought Arfield probably would play, but I'm just surprised then that he didn't start at the weekend there. I'd have thought that if they had plans for him to start the Old Firm, they would have started at the weekend, but there's every chance that...
Aye. I don't know if he's carrying a knock or something like that, and it was just a wee leg warm-up. I'm the same as you, actually, Robbie. I would have thought that would have been the natural... get the full 90 minutes.
Yeah.
You don't know if he just needed to be tweaked ever so slightly. He's the only natural replacement I can see coming in there to what you were saying. It doesn't naturally work if you drop anybody else in there. And then you get a little bit of both worlds with Scott Arfield, because he can do the physically aggressive stuff and he'll get up and down. He's also got that eye for running beyond and getting into the box. Whereas Joe Aribo, brilliant going forward, can drift out of games, attacking players that happens with. That's not a criticism. But I can think of a couple of occasions already this season where, actually I think against Celtic as well, where he's switched off and it's led to a goal when that tracking back from midfield. I think Dundee United as well actually might have been one of them. And so, you're not going to get that with Scott Arfield. He might give you best of both worlds. Maybe not for the full 90 minutes, but he might be a good place to start. Try and get bedded into the game, maybe get a goal ahead, and then bring on a Aribo to give their backline something to think about. Because if you're tired and Joe Aribo starts running at you, it's not just so much the pace; it's the trickery. But that's the only permutation I could think of that would change it up. Unless I don't know, Steven Gerrard's fitting a mechanical knee to Ryan Jack as we speak, which I don't think you're allowed to do under ethics. God damn them! But there we go. But I do agree with your wider point that Tav works best with Jack sitting in there, because he can tilt the triangle sometimes and drops in a little bit easier than any other player naturally does. I think we get caught out against Hamilton because Stephen Davis tried to do that drop in in the last minute when Tav had went quite far up, and people blame Tav for going up. No. Okay, I could understand that because it looks as though he's way up and there's no need to do it, but that's the natural game to us forcing them back, and the whole point being Tav expects somebody to drop into the hole to be there, and Davis actually got out on the wrong side of, can't remember who crossed it, but get caught out on the wrong side, wasn't able to make the challenge, and then the ball got whipped in. So I agree with Jack's the most natural dropping into the right back position, because obviously he used to play it as well.
Yeah, a perfect example of, obviously, Scott, I think you were going to jump in with something, so I'll be quick on this, but I think a perfect example as well, see if you go back to, I think it was our last game at Pittodrie, where I think we were 2-0 up and they scored. and it was a similar idea. Tab was really high up the pitch.
Yeah.
They brought back to 2-1, and everybody was slating Tab for it. But for me, I was watching it saying, that's a right centre mid all day. And at that point, it was Aribo. And again, it's no a criticism of him in particular, because I'm the same, I think he's a really good player. I just think for me, it's probably no his most suited role, personally.
So we go 1-0 at half time, and we come out for the second half and start the second half relatively well. We've spoke a lot over the last couple of weeks about how our player of the season is going to be, and we mentioned, guys, all the obvious sort of people: McGregor, Tav, Goldson. We spoke about the quality of Barisic, Kamara, Stephen Davis, Morelos for his contribution up front, and the sort of new style of play where I'm dropping in. We've not mentioned Ryan Kent, and for him to get his 12th goal of the season in the manner that he did at the weekend, that plus 14 assists, what a peach it was, Tommy, for him to get his 12th of the season, was it not?
Fantastic finish, fantastic technique, and I think he dips the shoulder to two of them. I think the second one really Gogic actually as well, and then just rifles it, and we see him do that quite a lot. In the end, the conversation will always be the end product with Ryan Kent.
Yeah.
A lot of times he stuffs the shots, he's maybe thinking too much about making the opportunity than finishing the opportunity, so to speak. But when he gets it, there's no doubt there's lots of talent in there. You don't spend the guts of 7.5 million for him, and we will absolutely make profit on that. I've absolutely no doubts about that whatsoever. He's contributed a hell of a lot, and he's one of those players where the stats don't do him justice.
Yeah.
And I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about people who believe stats are the best thing ever. Anyway, I work in data. Data will only tell you so much. Right? It's not contextual. Right? But people love to pretend that they're smart and point to data all the time. Is it the right time to roll out the Ebbie Scoville quote? No, not right now. Let's leave it to later on. Right? Anyway, right. Everybody knows where I'm going. I'm just saying, data is it's a really good set of clothes that can look really nice and smart, but actually could be, just covering up stuffed shirt, so to speak, right? Unless you know how to interpret it and you're actually getting the right stuff out. There is no data, as far as I'm aware, or any statistic within the football world that talks to things like Ryan Kent and Alfredo Morelos, right? But let's talk about Ryan Kent right now. That won't say, here's the goals and the assists that he gave you, but here's just him picking up the ball that changes the tempo of the game, the thought process of the back four that he's up against, or back seven or back 10, or depending on what it is in Scotland, and the midfield. Because when he gets the ball, or even the threat of getting him the ball, means two things. One, primarily teams will drop deep anyway, because he's got the ability to run beyond with the pace. Braga's a really good example of that. Aberdeen at the start of the season as well, break the line, get through. But also he's got the ability, for example, against Hibs, to pick the ball up relatively deep or near the box, dip the shoulder by two players, and then create something. And it might not always end up in a goal or an assist, but he makes other teams start to try and edge forward. We've all played football. You're keeping one eye on the guy that you're marking, but then you know that other guy's good, and the boy in your team might be up pace-wise or have the right bits. You start to edge across, and you create this gap. Ryan Kent, by definition of being on the pitch, creates gaps in people's minds and therefore within the structure. And that's what he brings to the team. And that's why other teams notice him as well. He's one of those flair players that gives another team a headache, so they have to think about that when they're doing their team plan to play against us. And it won't always end in a goal, and it'll end up in frustration. And I very much expect, when I'm allowed back in the stadium, to be uttering under my breath and cussing sometimes, where he skies it or he runs it out the pitch. But I will take a Ryan Kent every day of the week, going at players and being direct and losing the ball 7-8 times, before he manages to then do something like he did against Hibs. Absolutely fantastic finish. Do I think he's in the player of the season conversation? No, which was your point. Not at this point in time, no.
So, I'm not going to ask him why, Robbie, right? I'm going to ask you.
We don't have the time. It's a short podcast.
Can Ryan Kent be player of the season for Rangers?
This season?
Yep.
Not this season, no. But I'm a huge fan of him, though. And by the way, I'm conscious of the fact that it looks like I'm sitting pitch black.
Listen, just to prove that we don't edit things, is there a light switch close to you?
Outside the room. I mean, my house isn't that big, but...
Oh, you should get somebody to come. No, you should get somebody You
know what?
If somebody else was there, they could flick it on when you said something, like you'd a really good idea to answer a question.
Oh, aye.
Next time Tommy starts talking, I'll go, because I know there's no chance he'll be done by the time I get back. So.
Tommy make it a one-word answer. Oh, listen, by the way, I have to point out, don't you start. You're just as bad as me, by the way, Robbie.
I'm getting shocking, man.
The difference is I get a point to my answers.
So, Robbie, before I let you go and put your light switch on, you don't think Ryan Kent can be player of the season this year for Rangers?
No, I don't think he can, but what I will say is I think he would be in the conversation if it was someone else who was performing this well, if that makes sense. So sometimes I think that what he produces for us, in terms of, even if he doesn't score, even if he doesn't set up an obvious goal, what he produces for us in terms of his quality throughout a game, see if Hadji was to have done what he done at the weekend, I think he would be getting so much more credit. Not just Hadji in particular, but any other player. And likewise, if Greg Stewart, Hadji, Daniel Candace when he was here, if they were to produce the kind of performances that Ryan Kent does, then I think he would be getting a whole lot more credit and probably would be in the conversation.
Yeah. Sorry, just to jump in on that. There you go, stick the light off. But he's a victim of his own price tag.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Especially in the current climate, where a Scottish team has spent a lot of money, £7.5 million, whatever it was. Then there's an expectation that he delivers every game, and so when he doesn't deliver, he's looked at, to Robbie's point there, looking very, very bright there. I'm glad that the Wardens put the light on for you. I could hear him banging on the door. Stick that light back on. But I should point out that Robbie is not reporting live from a cell. I hope.
Not this week.
No, not this week. Let's see how it goes at the weekend. But I was just actually saying that, Robbie, very quickly and succinctly. And to your point, it's the psychology behind it. He's a victim of his own price tag. In that, if you look at Ryan Kent and he does something, fine, that's expected because he's 7.5 million. If he doesn't do something, is he worth the money? Whereas those people you've listed, Hadji maybe aside because he's got the name point to that as well. But if a Greg Stewart comes on and has a stormer, and you can't wait for people to see on social media, and he was a free transfer or whatever. It's the perception of how you start to look at it, and the genesis is people will quite rightly think about the price tag that Ryan Kent had attached to him. But he's a fantastic player. We're very lucky to have him in the team, and like I said, another one who we will absolutely make a profit.
So, in a wee second, I want to speak about the battle of the Hibs left back Josh Doig and our own Nathan Patterson along that Rangers right side. But before that, of course, Hibs did score against us at the weekend. Kevin Nisbet scored a really good header, dinking in ahead of Connor Goldson. Cross not stopped again from the Rangers left-hand side. Borna Barisic didn't really cover himself in glory on Sunday afternoon, Thomas.
Bit of a tough time, actually. And every time somebody says that to me, I'm reminded of, I think it was the Dundee United game, just before they scored. There was a cross just before it, and you could hear, I think it was Michael Beale, screaming, get closer, Borna. Yeah. He does have a tendency to take his time to get out, which is very strange because he's got the pace to catch up with people buying large to get out of jail if he needs to. But yeah, it is a bit of a theme. I mean, I think he was targeted slightly. We've spoken about the corridor between him and Helander. Boyle was obviously going at him, and I think people know that if they get a little bit of space on him, he will hang back before he closes down. He definitely needs to get better at that. Nisbet is a really interesting player as well. I really like Nisbet. I think people for a long time banged on about Shankland.
He's better than Shankland.
I would absolutely take Nisbet. I would take Nisbet if we could get him. Obviously not for a ridiculous Hibs fee, right? Yeah. I'm not talking spoons money, but I'm talking. But I should point out by that I mean a joke on Witherspoons, no other type of spoons. I don't want
any old iron.
I don't want anybody taking the wrong inflection from what I just said there. But if it was reasonable, I think he's a player who will absolutely, if he's not already been the subject of some bids at Hibs, I think people will definitely come into him. I think somebody in the Championship of England was sniffing around. Sorry?
Birmingham,
thank you. Who would want to pair him up, I would imagine, with Cosgrove. in that front too. I think he's a player that we should definitely look at, but definitely Borna Barisic has been identified as somebody who maybe can or doesn't get out quick enough. He just needs to get better at that. At this point in time, it's definitely led to a couple of goals against us.
Robbie, in the summer, if we have the opportunity to sell Borna Barisic, taking into account the money you could probably get from him in the first instance and his contract situation, I think we covered this probably briefly very last week. Do we cash in on Borna, do you think, this summer?
I think I touched on it in my horrendously put point last week when talking about Patterson. For me, listen, he's a really good player. He's been a brilliant signing, considering he was just shy of 2 million, I think. But I think through the talent we've got in the squad, realistically, from ones we're realistically going to get a good fee for, he's probably the one that I think there's opportunity there to cash in on, in terms of we'd get a good fee and be able to reinvest it to get someone hopefully just as good. Because I think that the only thing you would struggle to replace is his deliveries, because his deliveries from open play and set pieces are superb, genuinely very, very good and very consistent as well. Because I think that his first sort of season development was, he obviously didn't sort of hit the ground running when he signed with the club, but one thing you could see that he did have a good delivery, but it wasn't anywhere near the consistency he showed this season. However, I think for me, he definitely is one of the players where I would kind of almost hope we'll be able to cash in on, because as we spoke about last week, he's Croatia's number one left back. He's scored goals, he's set up loads of goals, and he's been a part of loads of clean sheets and winning a title. So it ticks all the boxes in terms of if you were to get an analysis to go into Scout or data, quote, whatever it is they use, he's going to be one of the guys that comes up near the top end. So your negotiation strategy is easy for the start. But likewise, I think there are sort of flaws in his game where in the current back four, he, for me, is probably who I'd be most comfortable losing. And when you couple that with the fact that we would get a very good fee for him, I think it's something that as a club we probably we could look to kind of take advantage of. But it's not undermining the impact he's had on our success this season. I just think that if we could somehow get somebody who could replicate what he gives us going forward, maybe not even the consistency of his deliveries as such, but they could offer something different. I mean, you look at, it's probably not a realistic signing. It would be a realistic signing for us, but if you look at like Stuart Dallas at Leeds, so totally different player, but he's a left back who is actually a right-footed player.
Yeah.
But he offers loads going forward, so it doesn't necessarily need to be. I think a lot of the discussion I've had with people is, it's kind of what I touched on there. It'd be a struggle to find somebody who would give us what he gave us this season, but you can still have a good attacking outlet for fullback that doesn't do exactly what he does, which is, putting a great delivery from deep consistently. It could be somebody who would, underlap instead of overlap. It could be somebody who would just kind of give the winger more freedom, but they're able to be more creative by, feeding better balls into striker, but they're also very defensively sound. So there's other ways of getting the best out of fullbacks. There's no a one sort of method fits all. So I definitely think that for me, he's probably, I wouldn't want to go as far as saying the weak link in our back four, because he's not a weak link. But if you were an opposition team, I think that's probably the area you would look at. So having taken everything into account, if we can get north of 15 million, for example, which I think would be within our right to ask for, it could be a good bit of business for the club.
I think a lot of that comes down to, and I agree, how nice it is to talk about Croatia's number one left back and say, we could probably lose him.
100%.
Exactly,
it's not a bad place. And I know none of us are saying that we would like or want to lose Borna Barisic, but ultimately this team eventually needs to be broken up because we need to cash in. Right? Business model. I try and say the words business model every single week. Right?
Plan.
I get paid for it. I get paid. Somebody somewhere is crunching the numbers, but ultimately we do need to cash in, and so you're left with not to reiterate everything that Robbie's just said there, but maybe just one or two key points that you're looking at. Does he have a good Euros? Because that's going to be a real big driver of a couple of million in terms, and the type of club that looks at him. Two, is he naturally who you'd want to be defending for you in the Champions League? Actually, that's a question that we need to ask right across the squad, right?
Yeah.
And then, what does your replacement look like? So we know Ross Wilson and Steven Gerrard and the analytics team will have in the black box several names. So who you can get in while still retaining a level of the profit. And then you compare them to Calvin Bassey, stuff like that as well. And then you need to bed them in. And to Robbie's point, which I think is one of the key points as well, how do you want your fullback to set up? Are you then looking to replace like for like? Or do you want to get a bit more physicality? Do you want to concentrate more on defending? Is the delivery the all important stuff? The way the Rangers set up, obviously the delivery from the wide areas is absolutely crucial. So that needs to be a key component. Borna Barisic could defend slightly better, right? But then again, James Tavernier cycled through that same point. And I think, as I said last week, and I've criticised James Tavernier before, right? But they've been part of a back 4/back 5 that set records for that type of thing. But it does come down to a numbers game, I think, purely with Borna Barisic. In that, if somebody, much like everybody else, turned up with a cheque and said, I think more than 50 million, if I was being honest, because he's only, 28, 27, 28? That's prime numbers type of space. He doesn't break down. People talk about goals and all that. Barisic, actually, after that first season where you thought he was maybe made of balsa wood, doesn't break down. He's got a really good fitness level. Gets up and down. Could you tweak his defending, or if he was dealing with a more stable back two? I don't want to sound like I'm being critical there of the fact that we keep changing one of the centre backs.
Yeah.
But if he's dealing with that, would that be an easier read for him? But yeah, definitely if money came in, I think it's all based on the Euros. If he has a really good Euros for Croatia, then I think we are absolutely staring down some really big numbers coming in for him, because his delivery is phenomenal.
I'm assuming, Scott, are you along the same lines? Is he the one that it's more an opportunity thing, I think, isn't it, rather than you want him to leave? It's an opportunity for the club to make good money.
Yeah, my own personal sort of stance is he's the one that I think we can make decent money from at this stage of his Rangers career. You don't necessarily want him to go, but I think we could cash in on him and we could make a really decent profit on him. I'm a big fan of him bombing forward, but I think Tommy's right. I think if we're lucky enough to get to the final stage of the Champions League, do you trust him alongside any of the full defenders that are there just now? I think he's almost seen as a weakness, a bit of a weak link. However, you take that away, you don't have anyone bombing forward in the same manner in the left-hand side. So it's kind of taking with one and giving with the other and vice versa. I think he could be the one that could move in the summer.
So I agree. That just two very, very quick things before we move on. I suggest, which is quite strange, you answering a question and me saying let's move on, right? I don't fancy being the host ever again, to be honest with you. But I did it once. That was enough for me. But in terms of that, I think it was against Celtic actually, where we didn't have Barisic and it was only Tav, and you noticed how lopsided we became.
Absolutely,
we were pretty easy to defend against. May have been the cup. No, it wasn't the cup game. I think it was a league game. But also, as well as if you're, I don't know what his contract status is right now, off the top of my head. How many years he's got left?
I think he's got a year to go after this summer.
Optimum timing in that. One of the concerns is you don't want to leave yourself lopsided when it comes to a team, so you need to get a good player in.
Yeah.
You can sell to them the CL thing, but also, if his contract's coming up, I know we're going through a contract cycle right now where we've done Tav and stuff like that already as well, and obviously McGregor. Is Barisic one that you cash in at? And that's before any of us ask ourselves, maybe Borna Barisic has done his stint, he's won a title, he's made a name for himself, he's nailed down Croatia's left back #1 spot. He might be looking at the payday of the EPL.
Home league form this season, we've got 17 wins from 17 attempts, 49 goals scored at Ibrox this year, and 3 conceded. Now, this is a bit of trivia, so you can feel free to batter in with answers if you think you know. We already know that Kevin Nisbet scored 1 for Hibs at the weekend.
That was my guess, Dan. That's my one guess.
So there have been 2 other goals scored by opposition in the league this year at Ibrox. Go for it.
Another one.
Is it Callum Lang, I think?
Callum Lang. The other one will be
he's definitely one.
The other
one is Dundee United. Who was it, Thomas?
I'm not going to say now.
Do you know who it is, Robbie?
Is it the boy Louis Aferi?
Oh, it's not him.
No, it's
You're
not
out.
really clear.
Tommy?
It's a Scottish name, and because he kind of, I'm still certain to this day that he wasn't trying to find the bottom corner on the
Oh,
volley.
McNulty. It was McNulty.
That's it. McNulty.
That's the answer,
Well
Mark
done.
McNulty.
Well done. I think I should take the credit for those
You teed
answers.
me up. Yeah, you teed me up.
It's a team game, buddy. It's a team game. There we go. Front two, sticking them in the back of the net.
Joking aside, though, Tommy, what a record that is, isn't it, for Steven Gerrard this season?
It's phenomenal in terms of we've seen all those games. The listeners, the watchers will have seen the majority of those games as well, and that there's been collective dominance of games. It'd be interesting if you compared that stat with the amount of chances that have been created against us over the course of a season. There we go. For somebody out there in Stato land, please
get on with it.
Yeah, please feel free to build that stat and then keep it to yourself. But you know, and I look forward to some DMs about that. But you know, in terms of that's where so it'd be interesting to know that, right? And the domination of teams against us. But we've by and large held teams at bay, even when they've dominated the play. A bit like Hibs, you know, it had good spells, but they weren't creating chance after chance after chance because we've been a great defensive unit. And then inside that, you've had those moments whereby things have come down to the crunch and Alan McGregor stuck out a paw, or John McLaughlin before him at the start of the season. Shouldn't walk past that. But it is a phenomenal record. And there's no inflection on that with regards to the quality conversation of the teams or the players in the league that we were having earlier. To get through to this point of the season, having only conceded 3 goals at home is ridiculous in any league. Yeah. Because you're not even playing just against teams there, you're playing against Lady Luck. You know what I mean? We haven't even conceded one of those stupid lucky goals.
Yeah.
And for some people watching of different persuasions, we've not even conceded any penalties. Who would believe it? But oh, sorry, my phone's ringing. It's John Beaton. Sorry, I'll phone him back. But it's fine. But you know, that's a glib way. But actually, there's a serious point in saying that at that stage, you generally are playing against the numbers and the statistics there, because in any given season at home, you would concede penalties, you would have freak goals, you would have a goalkeeping clanger.
Yeah.
Actually, we've had none of that, which means that your keeper's right on point, whichever keeper it's been. Your defensive unit's working really well because they're not creating all those chances that then lead to freak goals, and also their positioning is really good because they're not conceding penalties. I've obviously jinxed it and will concede a penalty between now and the end of the season at home, right? But I can't actually think, you guys will keep me right here, I don't think we've conceded a penalty at home.
Certainly not this season or recently.
Away to Antwerp, wasn't it?
I think we definitely conceded them in Europe, and I can hear the cries of that's because European refs are independent, right? But the point I'm making there is, by and large, and there's always a couple of decisions that you could question and argue about, right? That's pub talk. But the unit has worked really well to hold teams, back to my original point, at bay. You know, not very often this season can I think about as being completely chopped up and conceding clear-cut chance after clear-cut chance after clear-cut chance. That's why you get to this point of April and you've got a stat like that, which is phenomenal.
Robbie, I want to speak about Leon Balogun being offered a new contract in a second. However, if we can just take it back to the Hibs game at the weekend, there was a lot made about the sort of battle between the Rangers right back and the Hibs left back at the weekend. Our very own Nathan Patterson, who we've been sort of praising to death over the last couple of weeks for his performances. Again, particularly impressive at the weekend, but we have to say, as was the Hibs left back, Josh Doig.
Yeah, I think, first of all, on Patterson, I thought that was Patterson's best game for us. Because I think that in other games he's had, when he's been up against sort of tough opposition, no disrespect to Rangers, but I think there's been a couple of moments in the game where he's maybe been exposed or he's been, let too many crosses or whatever. Whereas I think, you rightly say, he was up against a good player, and I think going forward he gave us a lot of threat. He was always involved in the first goal. And likewise, defensively, I thought he was really good. But again, just as I touched on before, he just looks kind of natural. It looks as though he kind of belongs being in that first team environment, which I think sometimes can get very overlooked when young players come in, because quite often everybody gets very excited by a young player. We're all guilty of it, but sometimes they can
I would take Doig in a heartbeat. I think he's got bags of potential. You're absolutely right, though, in terms of we're left with Bassey. If you get rid of Barisic, something more substantial. So just a very quick point, Scott, I know you want to move us on, but it's just that I've always thought the exact same, and it's nice to hear somebody else articulate it, that I'm always looking at the physicality of players when they break through. And the difference to Nathan Patterson, who can stand up to that physical challenge, and it's really important. He reminds me the diametric opposite of, and I'm not having a go at the guy, but when you used to see Ryan Hardy come on, that guy, he's built like a wee boy, and you think he's going to get snapped with a challenge here and we'll never see him again. Yeah. And if you can't put on that, I think we spoke about this as collectively a couple of weeks ago as well, the physical aspects and having the actual physique as a player is absolutely important, particularly in the modern game. Now, you have to be able to stand up to the rigours of it, and whether that's doping your coffee or whatever, it's neither here nor there. But it's a massive difference to see such a young boy who's got the physique, and not only that, but he can handle himself on the pitch. He's got the ability to use it. He's got the brains to use it. That's all that reminded me of when Rob was talking about it. When I used to not laugh at Ryan Hardy, but I thought I used to fear for his wee legs. To be honest with you, was one of the things.
Ryan Hardy was very sort of Bambi-ish. I often felt when I watched him. You know what I mean? I think is he still down at Blackpool, Plymouth? One of the two, I think he's at.
I think it's Plymouth now. Yeah, I think he got released by Blackpool, or he sold. I can't remember.
Listen, back to my original point. I thought Nathan Patterson was excellent at the weekend. I think Robbie's absolutely right. I think it was his best performance in a Rangers jersey so far. And we'll see it again. I said it last week in the pod, and I absolutely stand by it. If there's a better right back in the country right now, then I've yet to see him. I think he's been excellent for us in the period that he's had to fill in for our captain. And again, if Stevie Clarke's looking for a right back for the Euros, he's definitely your man. Tommy, I'm going to stay with you because last week we announced that there was a year extension that had been handed out to Leon Balogun. Surprised or not so surprised?
No, I'll be fairly honest and say I was surprised. Not in a disappointed surprised way. Not in a I thought I'd won the Nigerian lottery and it turns out I've been scammed type of surprise. Or I've been catfished by a podcast. I thought I was coming on to Sky and I'm starting YouTube Muppets, I'm obviously pushing the boundaries of what I expect this season. But no, surprised in that I think Leon Balogun is a really good. I think he's a decent centre back. In all honesty, I think I've said before, I think his position is a little bit suspect and his pace gets him out of trouble, and that covers a couple of flaws in the plasterwork, papers over them. Whereas I like Helander better. He would be my choice because I think his brain, his positioning makes up for his lack of pace, and I'll take that type of person over somebody who's just fast any day of the week.
Yeah.
David Weir being a really good example for in that particular position, I should say, right? If he's cost effective, fine. I think it was a 1-year extension, wasn't it? I think you're right there. So it's not we're tying in for a massive deal. I think there might have already been an auction, so I don't know if Rangers might have had no
say on it.
I'd say on it round about that, which is fair enough. I don't have a criticism of him.
No.
He's not my first choice centre back. It's Goldson and Helander for me. I'd make no bones about that. I think he's been terribly exposed when he's tried to fill in at right back as well.
Yeah.
So he's not got massive amounts of cover to do that. Although in his defence, he hadn't done it for a long time. He might have got better over time, right? So not criticising for enough there. The other point I would probably add into that is if we did elect to do that and it wasn't an option, right? It wasn't triggered automatically, is what I mean by that. Then you need to ask yourself, are we keeping another centre back on the books because we are hedging our bets when it comes to Edmondson and Katic? Because you're left on the rota or roster, if you want to annoy people, you're left on the roster. I'll stick with rota of Helander, Goldson. Now you've got Balogun for another year. You've got
Simpson
coming through. You've got Simpson, and then you've got Katic and Edmondson. Edmondson, is the copybook completely blown? I don't know. Katic, there's always a question mark until the guy plays a full season. It's as simple as that with that type of injury.
Yeah.
And even then, the worries never go quite away, and his residual value's already taken a hit because he's had that type of injury.
Yeah.
So it's maybe a no-brainer from that perspective, particularly if it's cost-effective, and then you can take a position during pre-season. Just because he signed a new deal doesn't mean he can't be sold. If nothing else, we've just protected the value that we could maybe get for him in the summer. That's a
Robbie,
really negative view of it, though.
Robbie, were you a wee bit surprised that he got an extension?
I was, yeah, and just kind of for the reasons that Tommy mentioned. I think that as well, I spoke last week, I think, about the sort of average age of the squad, and if you look at our defence, you've got Barisic 27-28, Goldson 27-28, Helander 27-28, Tavernier is that same. So, and then I just thought that the fact we've got Jack Simpson's come in, Edmondson's went out on loan, which, I've not kept totally up to date with how he's getting on, but I think early on he seemed to be doing pretty well. I don't know, I'm actually not too sure if he's still playing regular.
I think he got injured, did he not? I'm sure I've seen something on his Instagram that
I think he did have an injury.
He got injured, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he did he had a run of a couple of games when he first went down, and he was playing consistently, and then he's broken down for a while. So it's not been an optimal loan for anybody.
Listen again, I'm inexperienced in a pod game. I probably should have researched that before talking about it, but here we go.
Not at all. Not at all.
Half the battle's just making it sound like you've researched it, to be honest.
I don't research anything before I come. I just made the potential of him come back, and then obviously Katic as well. I was just surprised because if you bring all that into the mix, you're probably a wee bit heavy in that area of the pitch. But again, it's Thomas that you don't know the sort of the monetary value involved. See if we are getting them for low wages, and there's maybe not that sort of outstanding youth prospect that can be the fifth centre back, if you like, then maybe it does make sense. But I do agree that I don't think he's signed as a backup right back anyway. Not that I think he's not capable of filling in, but if you were to be without, to have for a decent length of time like it has been just now, I'm not sure I'd be too comfortable having him fill in there. So I was a wee bit surprised, but again, you don't know the sort of ins and out of these contract deals. So if we are getting them for a sort of low value, then maybe it could do a bit of fun next season again.
Robbie, sticking with you, Old Firm game at the weekend, Sunday afternoon, 3:00. Biggest game of the season?
I
think the more you go on in a season, you see every game's the biggest game of the season. So probably
you get down off that fence for once.
It's like one of no, it's not, because our biggest priority was the league. So I think if you look back on the season, then the biggest one for me was Ibrox at New Year against Celtic. That for me was the biggest of the season. But I think it's a habit everybody's got. Well, and it's our biggest game of the season, which it is at time now. It is because it's our next biggest game, but it's certainly a huge one because I think it'd still be a huge achievement to win a Scottish Cup. It's something we've not been able to do in a long time, far too long, to be totally honest. Despite the fact that we've been, poor in the league recently, there's probably no excuse for the sort of poor attempts we've had at winning the Scottish Cup. So it's massive, and we said before, I think one thing that's important about it is these players have been championed quite rightly for being able to become champions. But I think that the time we start to worry as a club of where we go is when you accept the fact that we've won a league and that's what we're happy with. I still think that it's everybody's responsibility that we maintain expectation. So we should still be going into the Scottish Cup expecting to win it, and if we don't win it, we should be disappointed at that. So obviously the players will still get a lot of credit for winning the league, but where Glasgow Rangers we would have been involved in this Scottish Cup no different, despite the fact that we've done absolutely brilliant in the league. This is still a very, very important competition, and if we want to retain our status as the biggest club in the country and the best club in the country, then we need to win competitions. So winning the league alone has done that this season, but if we are to proper put down a marker, I think that would be backed up by going on and winning this cup.
Tommy, same question to you.
I was just about to say this is why I always bang on about the fact that I don't, by and large, give a monkeys about invincible leagues.
Yeah.
Because you don't win a trophy. Maybe a bit of bragging rights and something in the history books, fine. Rangers are built on silverware, not ink, right? And so I'll take the silverware every day of the week. I want to be able to point to a cup and league double. I want to end our rival season come April. That's my main concern. So to your point, it's the biggest game currently in the calendar. It's how I'll sit on that.
He's on the same fence as Halliday.
Yeah, there we go.
He's on the same fence as Halliday.
In that, it will then be swiftly replaced by the hopefully the cup final.
Yeah.
But I would take, as I always say with these types of things, without being too glib, I will take losing every game between now and the end of the league season, getting beaten every single league game between now and the end. If somebody tells me we'll beat Celtic at the weekend and then we'll win the Scottish Cup, because come the end of that, I'll say, all right, we maybe didn't get an invincible, undefeated league season, but we won the league, and I'm pretty sure it's the same trophy that you get, and it doesn't come filled with money or Smarties or something like that just because it's invincible. And we've got the silverware of the Scottish Cup, which has been too long away from Ibrox as well. So that's always the way for me. The league is done, right? And it's a nice to have that we're playing for an invincible season. But I'll trade it every day of the week for another piece of silverware, because that's what Rangers are built on. Silverware.
Tommy, do you think Steven Gerrard starts with the same 11 that started on Sunday?
I think there'll be a couple of changes actually in that back four, back five stable. We don't need to worry about that unless I don't know something terrible happens in training or anything like that. But I think that's the stable build up. Davis, Kamara in there as well. I personally think Scott Arfield might come back in.
Yeah, and
we will see potentially Roof dropping to the bench as well. I don't think it'll be a Roof Morelos up top. By and large as well, I don't think the two up top naturally worked amazingly well against Hibs. I thought there was little flashes, but I'm not entirely convinced that, and I don't think those two players naturally work overly well together as well, particularly when you're throwing in a Ken and then later on a Hadji and stuff like that. So that's where I think the work. We know that Tad's not fit. We know that Jack's not fit. So that midfield conundrum needs looked at. We've spoken about Joe Aribo earlier. And then we just need to sharpen that up. I sense that Arfield might be a good starting berth for that. If you dropped Roof out, you could keep Aribo and have Arfield in as well. And so then you drop Aribo in behind, so to speak, and you get Arfield maybe doing the doggy work a little bit deeper as well, which allows Davis to take half a step back and take from a slightly deeper place. That's workable, I think, and you guys discussed it earlier as well. We need to be ready and set up to counter the fact that Celtic will try and dominate on the wide spaces, and we have to be set up not only to fight that, but do a better job in the midfield than we've done in the last couple of Old Firms. Yeah. Because by and large, Celtic have overrun them and chopped us up a little bit, and just haven't had the presence of mind to take their chances. I think we need to keep an eye on guys like Elyounoussi and all that who've come into a bit of form. That's about as much as I know about Celtic at this point in time. But we do need to have that balance. And I think if you're dropping Roof out and you're sticking with Kent and stuff like that, then bringing in Scott Arfield might work. Or you could make, and this is the last point, a little bit more changes in that. You drop Roof out, you drop Aribo out, you replace Aribo with Scott Arfield, and you take a punt and you replace Roof with Wright, and you allow Kent, Wright, Morelos. And you allow Kent and Wright to transfer over, knowing fine well they also put in the shift coming back, so you can drop back into a midfield 5. That would be, if you like, to cover more space with Arfield dropping slightly deeper to protect Stephen Davis, or indeed going slightly further forward to be that extra man running beyond, which both of those guys can do as well with their pace. That will give guys like Forrest and their fullbacks, etc., a lot more to think about. And by definition, we'll ask Aya to step further back because he's the only centre-back with reasonable pace at that club. So that would be my only other throw into the hat.
I love the options that we've got, Robbie, right now, moving into the sort of back end of the season with the 2 big Celtic games coming up. I think my question to you is, where would you play Zungu? Joking aside, do you go along the 3 in midfield? Now, you spoke about this earlier on. Do you go with Davis, Kamara and Aribo, or are you, similar to Tommy, are you looking at the possibility of playing Aribo slightly more advanced and maybe sort of forfeiting Kemar Roof for the game?
Yeah. I think, even though last week I said that I think whoever played against Hibs would probably play the Old Firm game, I think, given the way the Hibs game went, I don't think you can go with that midfield again. Just for the aforementioned reason, I'll go for it again. So I think there's a good chance that Arfield comes back in for Roof and Aribo moves up one, because I think Gerrard seems to call upon Aribo in a lot of the big games, so I'd be surprised if he wasn't to start the weekend. But I would be quite surprised if we did persist for that middle 3, because again, we've been too critical of him. I don't actually think Aribo's played many great games against Celtic, particularly when he's been in the middle 3. So for that reason, coupled with how the sort of weekend went, I think it would make sense to bring Arfield back into midfield and then possibly push Aribo up one. But I'm also not against the shout of Scott Wright playing. The only argument I would make is if he started last week, I'd maybe have felt a bit more comfortable with it, but because he's only started one game against Cove Rangers, and I don't know when the last start he would have had in domestic football, that's probably the only sort of point you could make against him starting to maybe would be a bit unfair on him. But I certainly would be against it, because I think he showed a lot when he has played, and seeing these kind of games, I think having pace, I think it's a massive advantage, because it's going to be 2 teams, attacking each other. So I think as well, games against this Celtic side, I think they've struggled against sort of quick players. If you look at how Kent's normally performed against them, it's normally very, very good. And even like, you think back to like the goal Josh Windass scored at Ibrox and stuff, I always think that they do struggle against quick players. You look at their European games they've lost as well. I think they're one. Who's that mob that beat them 4-1? Prague?
No, it wasn't. Was it Slavia? It wasn't Slavia Prague. Obviously, it's. But it was Slavia.
It was Slavia Prague because we played Sparta. It was Slavia Prague.
Yes, sorry. Yes, it was Slavia Prague. Good call.
No, Sparta Prague.
Sparta Prague. We played Slavia.
Sparta Prague. Yeah.
I was trying to slowly get there in my mind. There's a reason I ruled them out.
I'm talking about guys that are quick. Clearly, we're not quick, because it took us 3 minutes.
I've not even got my wheelchair here.
But I think back to the game they played, they really struggled with their left winger that night, because they had loads of pace. So I think, again, back to my point, I wouldn't be against Scott Wright playing just because of that aspect. Scott, I don't know about yourself. What do you think?
It's a really difficult one. I think I would start Arfield and I'd start Aribo ahead of Roof. I just think that Arfield offers a bit more of a mentality that you need for Old Firm games in the centre of the park as much as anything else. I think it also takes Aribo out of that area of the centre of the park where things can get a wee bit tetchy in these sort of games, and Aribo isn't a great fan of getting up and in front of people and right in their faces, whereas if Scott Arfield's playing, you're going to get that with him. He'll he'll leave a couple of legs in as and when is required. Whereas with Joe Aribo, you're just not going to get that. And it comes back to what I said earlier on. I think playing 3 footballers in the centre of the park in that Old Firm tie often doesn't work. While we all want to see sexy football, of course we do, and want to see football all across the pitch, I think in the Rangers Celtic game, you have to have someone sitting in there who is prepared to hustle and bustle and maybe do the things that aren't so sexy. I think...
Well, I was going to say one to that. I agree with what you're saying there, right? I think we all agree in terms of that midfield. One thing none of us have mentioned, so I'll put the question to you guys, right? Which is, given that I suspect Celtic will start with pace and guys like Forrest might actually get a starting berth now that he's fit and stuff like that as well, and they'll look to exploit the fullbacks. Helander or Balogun?
Helander.
Good. Okay. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'm happy with that. I'm just testing the water with you guys. I'm never sure.
I think one of for all Helander doesn't have. I mean, it's well sort of documented about how his pace lets him down, but his mental pace, Tommy, you like that? His mental pace, I think, is as good as anything we've got. I genuinely think you're looking at a footballer who it's quite clear he's played at the top level in Italy. It's so obvious he's played in a relaxed defensive environment because he strolls through the games that he plays. He absolutely strolls through them. Unbeaten in a Rangers jersey in the league. Unbeaten. Incredible record for him to carry on, hopefully, through the end of the season.
Subject to obviously speculation from England as well, and I sense a couple of those clubs are trying to get in early before he probably nails down a starting place for Sweden and has a good Euros as well. The one thing I would say though is, given the way that I think Celtic will set up and play, and I'm on record as saying I love Helander. Him and Goldson are my centre back pairing, full stop. Until such time as Nikola Katic can get fit and show what he's potentially capable of. I have high hopes, but they were subject to before the knee issues. Would be Helander has been he's been suspect on conceding 2 goals. I thought his placement at the weekend was, you could question it. And then his goal in the Old Firm game, when I think it was El Yunusi scored.
Yeah.
Definitely made a bit of a something. And I think there'll be a lot of crosses coming into our box.
That's fair.
So not that I would change it. I'm with you guys. I'm absolutely on the Helander, Goldson train. But I'm just saying he needs to be very aware of that. But I do like mental speed. That's one that we can stick in the This Is Ibrox dictionary.
Listen, you're welcome. And your day job of using numbers, you're more than welcome to use it in there as well.
Oh, God, no chance. God almighty. People would laugh me at the building.
So listen, before I let you guys go for this week, we should add in our congratulations to the women's team who continue a real rich uniform after returning from the break that COVID sort of knocked them out with 5-0 at the training centre against Spartans. We have our next edition of the Women's Pod this coming Thursday. We're hopefully going to be joined by the women's captain on the pod this week, so we're really looking forward to that. It'll be myself, Graham Falk and Courtney McKenzie will join us. Courtney was lucky enough to be at the game yesterday. She has done a really good match report from the game. Jump onto our website, thisisibrox.co.uk, to have a look. All of our other stuff is on there, of course, as well. Completely free charge. All our interviews with guys like Warburton, Durant, Weird, De Boer, you know the drill. We've done it before. Get on there and have a look. You can also look back at the historical pods as well. We've got a lot in there and some dodgy looking coupons in there as well. Robbie, thanks for joining us. We look forward to reviewing the Old Firm game again next Monday. I hope you have a cracking week. We'll do it again next week.
Thank you very much for having me again, mate. Thank you.
And Tommy, same to you. Look forward to reviewing yet another Old Firm game next week, and hopefully a clear pathway into the Scottish Cup final, all things being well.
Fingers crossed. Here's hope for a good result.
Keep an eye on our socials for the Champions Top giveaway that we will be doing over the next couple of weeks from our good friends at Triple H Mortgages. Have a fantastic week. Good luck to Rangers next weekend. Bye-bye.
This is Ibrox, your Rangers podcast, brought to you by Triple H Mortgages, the one-stop shop for all your mortgage and mortgage insurance needs. Contact them on 01453 887179 or via email hello@hhhmortgages.com.
Fire's raging, I'm shaking. You wanna go out? I wanna stay in. Why?